So who are we? So in this room and externally, we are consumers. We all are people who are health interested, but we are also confused. We're actually trying, we're investing resources, time, money, emotions, and many of us, unfortunately, are frustrated and struggling. And in that investment of time and money and effort, it can happen because we're unhealthy and we're trying to get better health. But as all of us know, it can also happen when we totally have better health because we're in pursuit of keeping that better health. We're always thinking about, because health is dynamic, we're thinking about how do we not just get it. It's not a check mark. It's I want to get it and I want to keep it. In this room and at this show, we're better, what I believe we are the better brands. We're trying to enable better health. We know that that has to include better taste and often begin with better taste. We're looking for a better environment. We're trying to be part of a better world. And to do that, we really do need to be a part of better nutrition. The great news is today we actually know what better nutrition is and isn't, and I'll get into a little bit more of that. So this is a slide, if this was a presentation to consumers and to just general people out there, so put on your I'm a person hat for a moment. I like to go out there, I'm like, the big question, like, what do we all want, right? We all want better health. I promise you there's very few people that are like, I want better nutrition. That's not what we want. We want the results of better health. And when we ask people, how are we going to get it, the challenge that we have is we get this like paleo, vegan, fasting, juices, dairy-free. There's so many different answers, and it can be very confusing. Now, in this room, who are we? Well, we actually want better businesses. We've created better businesses. We want to support better businesses. We want to achieve better businesses. And how are we going to get it? And then the question from a lot of consultants and partners I collaborate with, it's like, ooh, is it the advertising? Or is it having you go on Dr. Oz and talk about our product? Or is it Twitter parties, right? Or is it now, what do I do on Snapchat? Or do I tell an Instagram story? And then it becomes, well, what about the claims on my package? And what about the fact that my package can no longer, I might have to get rid of the name of my product in order to have enough of the logos that need to be on there, right, that we decide today, right? And then there's also this question about scientific studies. And, we want to understand, like, do I create my own scientific study? I'm on a couple of scientific advisory boards, and one of the things that we are often challenged with is, do we help the brand and encourage the brand to invest in their own scientific study, or can you go out there and get a third-party study to be done, and how big does that study have to be? Because the bigger that a scientific study gets, does it get better? Is more always better? Definitely not, and especially not when we're talking about human health and nutrition. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the challenges, why don't we have it? There are so many definitions of health today, and really none of them are working. We've got the government defining it, with RDAs and different amounts, and all these people debating. We have this world of health enthusiasts, coaches, advisors. We have medical practitioners who, they may actually know a lot about nutrition, but they have no idea how that nutrition is playing out in the grocery store or in the supplement section. We have brands that feel like they need to communicate nutrition and talk about health, but how do they do it? Obviously the media and people as well. So why don't we have it? There are all of these, science says you are what you eat. I actually don't believe you are what you eat. I say you are what you digest and absorb. There are all these logos, logo on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? Of course, it's mine. No, I'm just kidding. But even in that capacity, people have said to me, ooh, should we put your logo on our package? And I was like, probably not. Like my logo might be a great place on your website or for something for you to promote to the trade, et cetera. But what logos are we choosing and how do we choose? So what we really have is a marketing mess of messages, right? So there's the question of, is it, are we talking about all natural? And does all natural mean anything? Or, is this from nature? Is it a good source and is it an excellent source of? And do we agree with how the government defines that or even how that can be presented? You can get a good source of an ingredient or an excellent source claim by having fortification or added ingredients in there that didn't come from the food, but your net label has that. And so is that really as good as a food that maybe has less but has it from the actual food, right? So we've got questions on that part. We have a lot of because we say so logos, right? So there are companies that feel like, and I get it, you feel like no logo out there represents what you're trying to do. So let me go ahead and explain that part. We have the world of calling things fast food, but fast food's actually awesome, and Apple is really like great fast food. but we have this world of fast food versus junk food. People are totally confused. When we call a section of the grocery store where the fresh fruit and vegetables are, de facto that means that the rest of the grocery store doesn't have anything fresh. Well, we know that our frozen section can be the greatest place to have fresh always available and can be a financial advantage to us. So there are so many things that we need to be thinking about. The fact that some people will say, come on, Ashley, you can get all the nutrients you need met by food. We likely can get all of our nutrients met by food, but we might also have to be home portioning out our meals and make that our full-time job, and that's what some people do, and that's totally awesome. But the other part is it also doesn't count for what environmental impacts may do or where our own health is right now. We may need more of certain nutrients, so what is the role of dietary supplements? So it's kind of a mess. It's leading to this. We have got a bad case of nutrition whiplash. And I think we're here to help address that. I also believe that we are all afflicted with what I call infobesity. So no matter if your information is totally awesome and it is the best information that is out there, it is drowning and making us all fat and bloated on too much information. So part of the reason I do what I do is to help us figure out how can we simplify that. Because if we don't simplify it, the net effect of what we have with this affliction of infobesity is we have people who are not just frustrated and stressed, people like ourselves when we're trying to make a decision, who are Googling or finding information, but we also have the issue of what the impact of that frustration and stress is doing. We know stress does what in the digestive system? Turns it off mostly. So if you are so stressed about what to buy to help your digestive system, like I have just added on that you're going to need double of it because the information is actually adding to the problem of whatever isn't going right in the digestive system, and that's going to be key. So let's stop it all. Let's get better health fueled by better nutrition. And here's how we can get it. So the great thing, I want everybody to work with this definition. I believe, by definition, better nutrition is that the body has the resources needed to function efficiently and effectively. And certainly the pursuit of getting better nutrition is thus then how do we get those resources? One of the key things is you need to know what resources you're missing and what ones you have, so that does require some personal evaluation. But the best part, and if any of you want more information on this, I'm really proud to be a part of an organization, a nonprofit that Dr. David Katz has started called the True Health Initiative. Today, he's bringing together not just nutrition experts from a medical practitioner standpoint, but people who are talking about nutrition from around the country, and we're talking about what better nutrition is and is not. And you know what? There are people who follow a paleo diet and people who are vegans, and they both agree. So the thing at the end of the day is not the label, it's about, at the core, what it is. So what I believe Better Nutrition Simplified is, it's better, it is not perfect. It's nutrition, I'll explain, there are just 4 pillars. It's simplified, it is not complicated, but this is really important. It is not oversimplified. And as we go down the marketing path, I think we have to be really clear to make sure we're not oversimplifying it. So you guys all have a copy of this plan, and on the flip side, how to use it. It's really kind of nice to know that there are actually only 4 pillars of better nutrition: quantity, quality, nutrient balance, and frequency. And the best part is, in over 15 years of working with patients, I've never met a patient that's doing all of these wrong. So you don't need to work on all of them. What we need to figure out for you is what you're already doing well, and then what we want you to work on. Okay, so now we're going to get into the nuggets of it, and I'll sit down with Bill. So what we want to talk about is how are we going to sell better nutrition simplified? How can we make it both simple and make sure that what we're talking about is better? And the key things that I've identified here, and there are probably more that we're going to talk about, is reminding that you, your brand, cannot be everything. You are some things and you aren't other things. And sometimes it's as important to communicate what you are not as it is to communicate what you are. But you really need to know those pieces rather than trying to be everything in that moment. You are not perfect, right? My mom and dad always love to tell me that one. Very clear, you're not perfect. And it's good to be reminded of that. It takes a lot of the pressure off. We have a lot of people that are out there today trying to eat perfectly. We have a lot of brands that are trying to be perfect. You can't be, and your nutrition can't be. Part of the reason is that nutrition, health, it's all dynamic. It's not static. So as soon as you think you're going to be one thing, something else may be changing. Like I could have an awesome workout plan today and I could walk, hopefully this doesn't happen, down the stairs and hurt my ankle, and then I don't have that awesome exercise plan, right? And then I have to adjust for it. And those same things happen in our body on an ongoing basis. Okay, this is a key one, and where we really want to start to go with this conversation is just because the science says, excuse me, let me make sure I do go backwards. Okay, there we go. Just because science says does not mean all most, or even certain humans do. And I think that one of the things that we really want to talk about today is where science isn't healthful or even helpful. I get attacked all the time, especially in certain areas of the argument on nutrition, about not being based in the science. I am totally based in science. I am a registered dietitian with a medical license, and you can't work in the medical profession without understanding science. However, if you rely on science, you miss out on one key thing, and it's huge, and it's called the H factor, and that is that humans are humans. We are all individual. So we have even done studies on twins and looking at their nutrition or how their nutrient absorption or anything else, and it doesn't play out the same way. So the bigger that a science study gets, like we have the nurses study and some of these that are huge, the less likely the information that we're getting from that is actually going to reflect people that are like each other. And so while science can be actionable, it may not be, and it can give us direction, it's going to do just that. And I think that that's a really important part when we look at claims. For example, it can be awesome that you're a great source of calcium, but then you need to know that if the body gets too much calcium, it doesn't have enough magnesium. We don't have enough magnesium, the cells don't turn off the stress response, they stay in a stressed space. So it's great that you have calcium, find a partner in magnesium instead of trying to increase your amount of calcium or talk more about calcium because calcium happens to be the fad of the day, right? So we'll go through more examples on that part. More labels isn't better. Better quality ingredients are, I think. Ooh, typo, sorry mom. Better quality ingredients are, whatever on that part. But just remember, we really, with labels, let's only use them if we really need them and if they're really going to clarify something. And then the final piece, when we're talking about spokespeople or people involved with your brand, it's important, and I try to remind consumers of this all the time, just because Betty Blogger or Johnny Jumpstreet says that they do something, doesn't mean that they actually do. That happens a lot in the celebrity world. And then the other part is, it also doesn't mean that anyone else, or more specifically, that you should. And so I think that's a key thing when you're looking at who do you bring in to your brand to have that conversation. People always ask me in my office, what did you have for breakfast? And I'm like, well, if you're going to judge your breakfast based on my breakfast, I hope you like, so we were talking about mushrooms before, I might have mushrooms for breakfast, or today I decided to have eggs and tomato, et cetera, and another day I might have something. I hope your morning is set up the way that my morning is set up. It is not going to be helpful. It might be interesting for you to know because I might spark an idea, but I'm not necessarily going to tell you exactly on that part. Or I'm not going to have the exact right answer for you. Okay, so I wanted to run through, I mentioned a couple of my partners, and I wanted to talk about this piece because I've had the opportunity to do what I think so many of your brands are trying to do, and retailers as well, and I think that this part is important. So I'll start out with Nature's Path because it's been one of my longest standing relationships, and as a company has grown, I've been on their path, they've been on my path, it's, kind of share it together. So at the end of the day, they started off, the founder, organic meant everything, a part of the organic movement, making sure that, we could have this organic labeling, making sure that in Canada and the US, there's the shared relationship. But the most important thing is that it's delicious food. And so when I say about better nutrition, it better be delicious. And I think that's a key thing. And the other part that I think is so important when we look at, especially in the cereal category today, is what I was talking about before, is that it's about food and it's not about fortification. So we're not chasing the story of a nutrient, we're chasing the delivery to the body of what the body needs as far as resources are. Something for everyone offering, as well as leaving the earth a better place, leaving the soil a better place. Manitoba Harvest is a great place, a great story, because how many of you 10 years ago knew what hemp was? Anybody? Okay, you're right there with me. Mike Fata helped me. I had no idea what it was, and I was cracking the story for Good Morning America on, what's the biggest trend? And I was like, I don't know if it's a big trend today, but I have a feeling it's going to be, so I'd like to say I'm also predictive of the future, because hemp is a very big trend. But it was really helpful for me. He told me about a lot of stuff. I'll be honest, I didn't believe him. There was no information. There's still no information, because we're not growing it here in the US, or we're just starting, about the nutrient content. So he flew me up there, said, come look at this. I've got to show you what's going on. And everything about this thus far has been about education. We have not done, double-blind placebo studies and all these things. Those are in the works. But working together, it's really been about education and helping people to understand just easy ways to integrate hemp into their diet. And that has spurred trial, that has spurred the trend. The interesting thing, and this is no disrespect to the world of flax or chia, I also, by the way, got involved with those trends and helped make those, and flew over to Australia and broke the story on chia, and it was really fun. But the interesting part about it is I've seen a lot of flax and chia that wants to beat up on hemp. Or one day I've literally from the media been asked like, oh, I know chia was like last year. Why is hemp so much better? And I'm like, it's not. It's just a different seed. It's a different plant. Here's what it has to offer. So I think it teaches us that lesson not to get too overexcited that we have absolutely everything that everybody needs and really be focused on what we have and offering that well. In the supplement space, just a phenomenal opportunity. I've worked with Natural Vitality. I sought them out 15 years ago because it was a product that I personally consumed myself. And as a company, and I am so happy that other than the government recognizing it, pretty much everyone else is waking up to the need for magnesium. So the government, just came out with these beautiful new labels that are really going to highlight calcium now. And I was like, oh, I haven't gotten to you yet, so I still have work to do. But magnesium, we have focused on what is better supplemental nutrition. We've talked about calcium. We've not eliminated that discussion. We've talked about the soil, the minerals, and why your total nutrition is what we need to look at. It's not, we tried to make things too simple. I don't know if any woman in this room has ever gone into their doctor and the doctor has said, you need 1,000 or 1,200 milligrams of calcium, please take it in divided doses, and there you go, right? And the reason they did is there was like this horrible game of phone tag that occurred from France, where someone identified that we need roughly about 1,200 milligrams, to the US that became, so then we need to supplement with 1,200 milligrams. I look at diets sometimes, I see 5 grams of calcium going in, and I'm like, I can't put enough magnesium into your body to correct that. And so that part has been really great in terms of working with them on really talking about the combination of your total nutrition. And then that's a great conversation also with TrueBrock. So TrueBrock is newer on the market, and it really has come out of the research that this wonderful 95-year-old scientist at Hopkins has been doing on the benefits of cruciferous vegetables. How many people here know that cruciferous vegetables are good for you? Okay, how many people here know what glucoraphanin is? Yeah, so that's the issue, right? It's great to know that it's good for you, but today's consumer wants to know why, and we want to know what's in broccoli that makes it so good for us. And when we start to talk about glucoraphanin, eyes might glaze over. So the nice part about partnering with TrueBrock on this is that I don't have to talk about glucoraphanin as much as talking about broccoli. However, the reason I do talk about glucoraphanin and why it's absolutely one of the most critical things for all of us in this room to pay attention to is if we don't support our body's detoxification systems, and I should stop there, most people don't actually know that we have a detoxification system, so sometimes my education has to back up. I have a good feeling that this room does. But if we don't support our body's detoxification system, we are not going to be able to stay healthy in today's environment and moving forward. I hope we can clean up the planet. I hope we can clean up things and have less toxins. But we have external toxins, and then the body naturally uses up hormones and needs to detoxify. And broccoli is not the only vegetable that does it. It happens to be my favorite food, so we'll also talk about that. But what glucoraphanin does is it goes into the body and gets converted into sulforaphane, and sulforaphane upregulates phase 2 detoxification. And I'll stop there because this isn't a medical discussion. But what's really important is if you are promoting a product as detoxifying, or if you are telling somebody to go on a cleanse, or if you yourself are doing that and you're not getting in your broccoli or you're not getting in your glucoraphanin, you're not supporting the body's detoxification system. So a lot of what I do with this company is I go out there and I get to debunk what detox is and isn't. How many people here have gone on a detox or have heard about detoxes? Everybody. It is the greatest thing right now, right? But a lot of them have no nutrients that are supporting phase 2 detoxification. So they're actually not detoxifying. So in that way, one of the things that we've done with TrueBrock is I've helped them put together a scientific advisory board so that we can continue to work on that science and also focus on the communication. In an instance like that, we have to have the science. You have to be grounded in the ingredient science in the supplement space. And you have to be careful to understand, somebody said to me the other day, well, doesn't kale have glucoraphanin? Absolutely. It doesn't have as much as broccoli, but it has it. So if you love kale, keep eating your kale. If you like broccoli, keep it. And if you like neither of them, there are supplements that have the TrueBrock in it, or if you don't have access to the broccoli, we've got that. Okay, so that is, and we want to talk right now, we want to move into, so how can we keep it? I like to tell my patients, the slide before was about a journal, that we want to journal, but this is really what I think you want to be thinking about as a brand as you evaluate thinking about how your business can sell and promote nutrition and have it be the win for better business overall. You want to set up what your success rules are. That's really critical. Your rules are not going to be the same rules or the same goals as someone else's. Make sure you're measuring that success. Assess what is working and do that frequently. Continue what is working. Don't decide to do a whole do-over all the time. Assess what is not working, and that's where we want to get into what are some of the things that we can do that's different so that your brand can actually achieve those successes and then repeat from there. So now I'm going to jump in with Bill. We're going to chat, and then we're going to open up to them to chat.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
cool, groovy. Let's do it.
Well, thank you. How about a little?
Oh. And great socks, by the way.
Thank you.
I really like them. Yes. Thank you.
Well, so hemp, mushrooms, broccoli. What else should I have for lunch?
Yes.
That's really what I wanted to ask.
So let's start with what would you like for lunch? Right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And that's it, really. If we start from what we want to have, the surprising thing happens when we actually have what we want to have. Let's all put ourselves in the head of a 3-year-old. What happens when they get what they want? They're happy. It might be temporary, but they're happy for a bit of time. That's actually what happens to us. So you have to figure out how your total nutrition in a day can meet what makes you happy. And sometimes when you're traveling or at a show or something like this, you may not have the kind of healthy meal or that sort of a thing that you might have at home that has all of those ingredients. That's where your supplemental nutrition can be a part of your total nutrition.
Well, as you say that about what makes you happy, I think that's an interesting question because
Yeah.
for some that might be a pint of Ben & Jerry's, right?
Totally.
And,
Does it really make you happy?
and does
In the
that
moment?
evolve over time, right?
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that palate for what makes one happy? How does that? Do you see that shifting for people?
So the interesting thing here is, so sugar actually does make us happy, right? So for the most part, unless you happen to be in a place where your gut dysbiosis is such an imbalance of good and bad bacteria that just makes you really bloated fast, if that happens, it's not happy making. But for most of us, sugar just like hits that pleasure point, alcohol hits that pleasure point, coffee hits that pleasure point, and we're happy. The problem is we know the drop off. Right? And so how long are you happy for? And then really, it's a little bit in it, without getting too esoteric, is how do you define happiness? So there are competing things of happiness. If I need to feel happy in the moment and I turn to food to feel happy in the moment, but I know that there's a downside, or I'm trying to work on my weight, or I'm trying to, I'm in cancer prevention or cancer treatment, or I have an autoimmune disease, or any of these other things, I know I'm not part of my goal there, so that's not lasting happiness. So one of the things that we actually need to do, and I've become fascinated with understanding habits, is really, and I was giving this analogy yesterday, and I think the more I think about it, I just think it's fantastic. Do you remember when we all gave up fat, right? So we all gave up fat. We decided all fat was bad for us, right? Because it's so bad for our heart, or it's in that way. And then we came to find out that actually no. Now we actually have created more problems, and fat is good for us. But certain fats are good for us, and certain the processing of certain fats make them bad for us, or too much of certain fats is a negative. And the exact same thing happens in the habit space. So when you're talking about making yourself happy, there are actually a number of things that can make yourself happy. So you could have that coffee, you could probably also do yoga, or if you're someone who loves to run, or you love to turn on a fun song and you love to dance it out, or whatever, that could also make you happy. And what we have to do is we have to start teaching ourselves by replacing, because what we did in the fat space was we learned that we actually need the fat, but we need to replace the absence of fat or the bad fats with better fats, and we need to do the same thing from a habit standpoint.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm curious too, as we talk to this room, maybe a show of hands, how many manufacturers do we have out there? And how many brands and retailers? How many of you are consumers? That was a trick question.
Yeah,
they got it though. Most of them got
I
that
forgot,
one right.
yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's interesting. Because one of the things you talked about, in terms of branding, this information overload about all of the different. The certifications really hit me. You've got organic and non-GMO, even though one already means the other.
Yes.
You've got all these. It's gluten-free because if it's gluten-free, it's healthier.
Right. So one of my favorites was I did see a water labeled gluten-free, and that was tough. I might even get in the alcohol discussion, but the water labeled gluten-free. And it is overwhelming. There's an interesting thing that happens as we speak here, like with our tribe at Natural Products Expo, and that is that unlike, I think, so many other places where I might go and have conversations with brands and retailers, we actually are our consumers for the most part. And so I think that understanding how and in a way, as a result, I think it's almost even a more infobesity or dizzying feeling, because when we hear something that might be conflicting in science or might make us, if our product or a brand or ingredient is having a bad day in the news, it actually impacts us because we believe in it. We many times have sought it out, created it, been in that space. And so I think that can really create a challenge internally. And one of the things that I recommend for my patients across the board, and I often treat many of my brand partners like patients in that way, is stop the noise. So do the detox that we really need are from the dieting and the nutrition messages. We don't need to figure out if it's 1 cup of coffee, 3 cups of coffee, 4 cups of coffee. So there is better for you, better quality coffee. And that's, if you're going to drink coffee, that's what I would prefer that you have. It's not always going to happen, but I would prefer that you have that. And then how much of it is really going to be a situational thing, and it's also going to depend on where your health is today. So some days I can have coffee, and if I had had 2 cups of coffee, I would have gone through that twice as fast, and nobody would have understood. So, then there are days where you say, like, have the tea, Ashley, just have the tea. So we pick it that way, not because a study is saying to us. And too often, what a study does, and this is especially true in the supplement space, is there's often one ingredient that's being studied, but they're not studying 12 different kinds of vitamin E, right? They're studying one ingredient. And what that is really unhelpful for is then a big study comes out about fish oils. But all they studied were actually isolates of omega-3s. So that's actually not a fish oil study, right? Or I had another one when that fish oil study came out and said it was bad for the prostate. Does everyone remember this? So my email was overblown. This was like 2.5 years ago. I couldn't catch up. And part of it was I was doing a bunch of media on this because I'd looked at the study and I was like, we've got issues here. And then I went back to my email. The majority of emails that I received that started with, but you put me on this, signed Betty, Susan, Stacy. So they were all women. And I was like, I did. And when you find your prostate, call me, because I got to do a lot of other things. So I think there's a big piece there too, where sometimes the information, I share it like in jest, but I have a wonderful an actress, I don't know if you guys follow Bones, but Emily Deschanel, she was having trouble with her vegan diet, and I've worked with her for years. And at one point, and we found out she was totally intolerant to soy, and it wasn't like one kind of soy or whatever. And I don't talk about patients without them being comfortable with it. And she was doing awesome. Once we got her off soy, I introduced her to hemp, and we talked about making sure her protein needs were met, and we played with also liquid nutrition, because on set you don't really, like, sometimes you need to throw something back, but if you throw down a big salad with a bunch of stuff on it, you can feel bloated. So here's the benefit of liquid nutrition. Sent her off on her way, and she did amazing. And then I didn't hear from her for maybe like 2 or 3 months. She was off doing a movie. She comes back and she's like, I'm doing horrible. Like, my skin was all broken out. I'm doing all this. She had been following, it was still vegan. She had been following and getting food delivered on set, the plan that the director was doing, because he was 400 pounds and on a weight loss program and had pre-diabetes. She had none of those. Like, she's female, she's fine, right, et cetera. And 2 of her meals in the day were soy. And I just was like, and I sat there, and she's like, it was almost like she was in a confessional. And she's like, I don't know why I was doing it. Well, it was free, and it was there, and I'm like, so, like, you're doing kind of okay, and like your stuff was getting delivered, and I don't say it because, like, oh, we should all do what celebrities would do. It's actually the opposite. If a celebrity that is getting all this stuff and has all these resources and is dealing with, if they can be influenced by all of these crazy nutrition messages and somebody else doing something and all of these other pieces, we're all in, we all have to remember how influential just even a single conversation can be, at the office.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned simplifying but not oversimplifying.
Yeah.
And I think what you're speaking to in some of that is the oversimplification, right?
Yes.
We hear, when spinach was tainted with E. coli a few years ago, no one wanted to eat spinach.
Right.
It's like, well, actually, it's probably E. coli you don't want to be eating. But,
exactly. Cook your spinach for a little bit of time, and let's see on that part. But one of the things was, and I think we see this a lot, is that in the natural product space, your brands are authentically providing what it is you're talking about in your ads or in your marketing messages, your social media, and then you see a brand that isn't doing that, and they're communicating it. Like, my favorite was a commercial for ginger ale that was talking about the benefits of ginger, and then you read there was no ginger in the product, right? And I was like, so that's cool. You're talking about the benefits, but selling your product, kind of doesn't work. And I think that oversimplification, there is a desire for oversimplification. One of the retailers, like, I get it. I get where you're trying to go. But one of the challenges I have with my patients a lot is that people will say, oh, I heard I should shop the perimeter of the grocery store, right? Yeah, because that's where like only the healthiest stuff is on the perimeter. Like, I don't know what store you've been in recently, but the perimeter right now is like chock full of expensive, ready to eat, sometimes healthful, but like if you're price sensitive, and oftentimes doesn't have everything that you need. And I love grains. Like, I love to go get my oatmeal, or, you know, I love to go over to the frozen section and get my organic frozen, because I'm not finding the organic in the ready to eat. Notice I didn't say fresh section. And so I think that kind of a conversation, sometimes we oversimplify, and doctors really want us to oversimplify it. I mean, like, who here has ever matched their meal to a pyramid? I literally have not. Like, I don't care, and like, there's nothing about a pyramid, or even my plate. My plate's going to look totally different than your plate, and my plate that the government's recommending is going to be way too much carbohydrate for most of us. So how do you know, so I think this oversimplification, this idea that actually everyone in the country should have the same looking plate, and it's so ugly looking too, that my plate. So anyway, let's just keep it on that part. I think the oversimplification can often be as great of a challenge as something that's really complicated. I started off talking to you about glucoraphanin, sulforaphane, and phase 2 detoxification. I am not going to talk to the majority of people about that. I am going to tell them that they have a detox system. And I am going to tell them that when they eat broccoli, they're actually doing something. You know, if it's like if it's October and we're talking about women's health, and everyone's rightfully so focused on a lot of the estrogenic cancers, it is great to know that when the body uses up estrogen, it becomes a waste product, that if it's not eliminated properly, it becomes a toxin. That has nothing to do about whether or not your food is organic. It has to do with whether or not your body is going to eliminate that organic. And so you need your detoxification system working, you need your digestive system working.
So how might you talk about that if you
Yeah.
had a product that featured broccoli? Could you,
Yeah.
is that enough to give you a ticket
So
to talk about
yeah.
detox?
So, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with my Ashley Koff approved nonprofit project I've been doing for about 15 years, and I've audited about 60,000 products at this point. And, you know, some of the ones that end up in the Health Hall of Shame are the ones that tell me that they're a kale chip or you know, a product with broccoli, and then it's the last ingredient, or it's a flavoring, right? Now, there are certain things that you only need a tiny amount of. So the other education that I do for consumers is sometimes the last ingredient being the last ingredient isn't a bad thing. Like, you don't want a lot of oil of oregano in your product, I promise. Like, you're never gonna want to eat it if it's the first ingredient, and that doesn't make it bad. Another oversimplification is, you know, oh, we should only have 5 ingredients in our product. Really? What if your product has 37 totally awesome organic whole food ingredients? You know, that part's gonna be great on that piece. So what I look for with something with broccoli is that they're not miscommunicating the benefits. So for one thing that we know, and one of the reasons that I focus on the supplement form of glucoraphanin quite frequently, especially with patients where I'm trying to support their detoxification, is that most Americans cook the glucoraphanin out of their broccoli, right? So it will go out with the water if you are steaming it. You know, some people cook their broccoli for like 10 minutes. Who's had broccoli in a school or a hospital setting? I don't think it has a lot of glucoraphanin in there. However, it's still good for you. So I still want you to eat it. I just don't want that product to be, if that's what you're freezing or drying or, you know, piecing and parting, then I don't want you to be talking about that ingredient. So before you get into the specifics of that, it's like helpful to understand. I think the calcium magnesium one might be one of my favorite examples, because, you know, so I like to show people actually a muscle contraction. Can you guys all see my muscle? Just making sure. Okay.
Could you zoom in on
yeah,
this?
that's right. So the calcium, if you flex that's calcium, right? And so then, like, I can do that, but if I had to do that for a really long time, it would suck. So then we want to let our arms go, and that's what we need to do more of in our day, right? Like, just kind of let it go and let our arm relax, and that's magnesium. And so, you know, for me, it is not a win when, you know, an almond milk is telling me I have 50% more almond milk, or more calcium than milk, or I have my yogurt's 67% more calcium in it. So it's great to talk about how much calcium you have in there, but from a nutrition standpoint, what I want to talk to you about is like, hey, if you have your yogurt and you sprinkle, you know, maybe those chia seeds that I was mentioning, or the hemp seeds, or some whole grains and some spices on top of it, there you're going to get great nutrient balance, and your yogurt, if you're the yogurt company, is going to provide you that calcium that you need to contract your muscle and to like be on and, you know, make things happen and build healthy bones. But I'm also adding onto it nutrients that are going to help with the other part, and understand that partnership. So the message there is be wary of the superlative. Like, you just don't need to have the most in the category, because I also promise you, it's kind of like everywhere in life. There's probably always someone that's going to be prettier, always someone who's going to be skinnier, always someone who's going to have more money. Like, you don't need to shoot for that. You need to be comfortable with what you have and understand if you don't have certain resources, where you're going to get those resources from. And I think that's probably the lesson there.
It's interesting too, because I think to a great degree in the natural product space, there's always been this belief that just because it is natural, it is good for you.
Right.
And to a reasonable degree, there's some wisdom to that,
Yeah.
depending on what it is we're talking about.
Yeah.
So on the one end, you really someone might want to promote what the minutia of an ingredient can do for
Yes.
your detoxification system. On the other end, someone might want to just promote this is
Yeah.
this is this is biblical age food.
Yeah.
Like how is that for you?
So
What do you think?
the coolest part about that, the easiest way to rip that apart is that there's no working definition of natural, right? So and that's unfortunate. We are at the Natural Products Show, so I understand that and I mea culpa on that part. Maybe a renaming is in the works. I don't know, but it's really hard. I mean, the consumer today is aware, and it's just I don't know what natural means. So tell me what you're talking about. So I think whether you care about this was eaten in the Stone Age. So I like having heat in my house. I have a roof over my, I'm not living in the Stone Age. But there are aspects of the Stone Age that are really interesting to think about what it meant when our bodies had to do and when our food had to do, when our food has to fight in nature to grow and thrive. And it's why adaptogens are so incredibly powerful. When they have to thrive and when they're not, they don't have pesticides on top that are, trying to repel pests or whatever, but the actual food has to fight, it's going to create a nutrient bomb for us, right? That bite for bite, we're going to get those nutrients. And that's what's exciting in that part. And so I think when you choose what your story is, it's that thing of think what you are and what you aren't. And if there's this, this paleo trend, this paleo thing is here to stay, but paleo also needs to fall under better nutrition. And if your paleo product is not better nutrition, then I don't have anything nice to say about it, and you may end up in the Health Hall of Shame on that part. So I think the natural, just standing by natural is no longer going to be helpful or healthful. It's really in the design and the communication of what it means to be natural. I think the other part of what you're asking about is, do you go in the macro and talk about your product, or do you go into the micro with the nutrients? And my recommendation there is there's a place for it all. So that's one of the thing that I have the most fun with as somebody who helps and often is a communications partner with a brand, is turning around and saying, so on my webinar, I am going to dive into phase 2 detoxification and talk to you about that whole pathway, and I'm going to tell you that I'm attracting an audience of integrative healthcare providers and practitioners. I'm not going to tell you to do that on your site. On your site, I'm going to tell you to have recipes that celebrate broccoli, and oh, by the way, not make everything about broccoli. Hey, I want you to do something here or do something there. Same thing, I think, from if you're talking about cereal, you could go through every single nutrient that your cereal has. But if I go through every single nutrient that my cereal has, I've lost people. I mean, Total tried to do that years ago with their commercials of stacking it up. It's effective in the moment, but that's really not what people are eating for. We want better health, and we're eating for deliciousness. And so stop with just the picking of one nutrient or the other. The final piece on that I think is really important, and this is now I'm putting on my media hat for those of you in the room, and Bill in this part sharing it with me, is that we still are in a world today where the media loves to fall in love with the latest trend, right? That the media needs news, right? So that's what they're looking for. That's what we're looking for. The problem is a lot of times when you are so excited about them falling in love with you, what you've missed is they are going to fall out of love with you. And so what I recommend is creating a story that, like we've done, I think, with hemp, which is it's a lasting story where there's always going to be more news to talk about. But we never went in with hemp is so much better than chia, so much better than all this stuff, and you need to know about chia. And we've seen others that have struggled. Acai is one that has struggled. Acai, I love acai. And there aren't, in this building, there aren't the people that said acai was better than a blueberry. But what happened when it mainstreamed is there were plenty of people that said, have your acai. So it's difficult for Americans to think we can knock our blueberries and just promote our acai, and that inverse happened, and now we saw a lot of negative. It's hard for acai to get any love today. I've had people who have said to me, I'm not touching that acai. I heard it's actually really bad for you. Bad for you. So I think that part is where we run into, and olive oil has been experiencing it. I mean, this is like literally I'm having to convince people again that olive oil is good for you, but we had a wake-up call about there was a lot of not good olive oil on the market. So just be careful as you're crafting your stories, and also looking at the science studies and not looking for studies that you don't need a study that says that your berry is better than somebody else's berry. What you want to look at is and maybe it is just a small study of how your berry did in a small subset of people when you looked at one specific thing. And I love the studies where they swapped one thing out in the diet, or they just added one thing in, as opposed to created a whole different lifestyle change, right? Because then who knows what was working on that part. Maybe they just stopped smoking and stood a little more. That
Right.
could be good.
Right, exactly. So, and maybe when these studies come out, read more than the title of the study. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, not only that part, and you guys do an incredible job of actually breaking it down and looking at it, but that's the unfortunate part for the media. And please don't send them press releases that just say I don't know if you guys get my newsletter, but I got a pitch from a company about it was National Banana Day, and in advance of National Banana Day, they were sending me a candy. Bananas can be really difficult to have available. Did you know that? Because I've never, of all the fruits that are out there, I've never called banana difficult. And so instead, there was a candy that you could have on, not just on National Banana Day, but on any day when you're just craving that flavor of banana. And why did they say that flavor of banana? Because there was no actual banana in the candy. It was just banana flavor. And then when I called the publicist and said, how dare you send this as a PR release to me, the response I got was, oh my gosh, how did you get on our media list? literally. And then she said, is there any way you could take that down off of social media? And I was like, there isn't. This is too good. And I'm going to tell it to anyone who will listen. Because the reality of it is, and that's not a study example, but that's an example of what we're dealing with. And so if you are somebody who's if you as a brand have a publicist and you let them put a press release out like that, shame on you. Shame on you, and your brand deserves to. And I was like, the good news is your brand got a lot more attention, but the bad news is probably not for a good reason. And I think the one-liner on the science studies is so important. Please also don't talk about a study before the study findings are sent out, and then engage a scientific advisory board, or come to a bunch of us who will say, here's what we think about what you're putting out there. And if I like something, I am way more excited about talking about it than I am about this PR banana stuff,
So I tend to, when I hear about a new superfood or a healthy food, I just go to the Starburst flavor that's most similar to that. Are you saying that might not be?
That's totally. How's that working for you? And your teeth. You've got good teeth, though.
Well, they're not mine.
There you go.
Yeah. It's somewhere in your literature you've talked about how we really, as overwhelmed as we are, there's all this conflicting information. We really do know what's good.
We totally do.
Who's the we in that? Who knows? You?
Yeah. So, and it is not me, because I am so grateful to all of the resources that are available. So, by the way, you guys are all resources for me. Every one of you that has brought me to a farm, who has sent me information, who has sat down with me and talked to me about why you've chosen a certain ingredient, or more importantly, quite honestly, why you haven't chosen other ingredients. And not in I'm beating up on another brand way, but maybe it's just even we realized, we couldn't guarantee the sourcing of this organic ingredient, so we have a rule that we always go with 3, or we do something on that part. And so we are, and I think I brought up the True Health Initiative because I love seeing this happen on a larger scale. I like to say true nutrition experts, and that's not a diss on a non-true, on a false one. It's not to say that there are false, but here's the thing. I can tell literally within 30 seconds, sometimes it's even under 30 seconds, of listening to someone on television. I can tell from their Facebook post or Instagram immediately, and I can usually tell pretty quickly on opening up a book if somebody has ever worked with a patient other than themselves. And the reason is we just know. You know that the answer, it does not matter if you have the information. If you don't have the skill, the strategy, and the capability to say to someone, so this is what I'd like for you to do, and here's what I'm going to focus on for you, that implementation piece. And I think that when you look at and decide who you're listening to, I think it's really important that you collaborate with at least. There's great reasons for people who are, playing with your food and developing recipes and doing this part. But when you're really talking about the nutrition part of it, please make sure that it's somebody that is actually working with people. Because what I know is, like all of us, we have to prioritize. I have to turn around and say to someone, that's so far down your list right now. Even with weight loss, that might be down on your list. Let me get you quitting smoking. Like let's focus on that part. So the analogy plays out when you start to look at food and food choices on that part. So I really think the expertise in that space that I'm talking about are people who are working with patients and who have helped to understand those implementation strategies as well as the prioritization that it takes.
Yeah. And then you also mentioned environmental factors. So
Yeah.
Just when we can decide that fish is really good for us, then there's mercury in our fish and things like that. And those are ever-changing tides,
Right.
if you will.
Right.
And so in addition to spinach is good one day, it's bad the next day, then there are actual real changes to some of these things.
Yeah.
How do you suppose anyone could
perchlorate
navigate
in
that?
water. So one of the greatest things that I think is happening is I think we're starting to understand that we need to have more knowledge of not just what an ingredient is, but what it also may be delivering, like its other ingredients, right, in that way. So water, awesome for you. Water with perchlorate, preventing iodine absorption. So now we have all these people who are taking Synthroid who may just have benefited from cleaner water. And that's an oversimplification of the Synthroid thyroid problem. But we do need clean water. So one of the things I recommend is testing, is making sure that you're testing. One of the areas that is fastest growing that I think is fantastic, but also comes with challenges in its early growth phase, is the testing of ingredients and the product and the assessment. But it's why I'm so focused on organic, not because organic is perfect. Remember I said that isn't the case for anything, but because organic, I'm not just focused on GMOs. Like the GMO labeling issue for me was I always wanted to be able to know if something that wasn't organic was non-GMO. That was the space that for me, I was interested in for my patients and et cetera. But what we've done right now is we've actually flipped things. We have made people think that GMOs are a bigger health crisis in their food consumption than the mercury in their fish, than the perchlorate in their water. And the reality is we don't even know. We don't even know if there is anything about a GMO that it could be what many of us have said is like maybe it has to do with then that there's more pesticide that's more of the glyphosate that's used on the product, and it may have nothing to do with the genetic modification. So the concerns I have in the GMO space are just not enough science for me as a healthcare practitioner to feel okay making that recommendation to say to my patient, this is just totally safe. But the reason I'm about organic and focused on that piece is it really is. It's not an oversimplification, but it's simplifying the ability to say, wow, all the different steps are being looked at here to try to help improve the environment in the future, so maybe we have less of some of these issues, but also to allow for a plant and animal, the combination of the two, to cultivate the nutrients that we would hope would be in that product from the get-go.
Yeah, well, and that is one of the challenges with organic, right? Is
Yeah.
that certification means 100 things, and so
it's not a challenge. So I think one of the challenges with organic, if anyone's in here listening, but is actually the marketing of organic. I mean, we really out the door. We need to continuously do better. I've actually gotten more involved with the marketing over the years. So when we talk about organic as a certification and we think of it as like something with non-GMO or gluten-free or dairy-free, we're missing that organic is actually a system, right? It's a production system, and also for people to understand with the NOSB that we reevaluate ingredients every 5 years. So as a medical practitioner, every 5 years, I either have to take boards or prove that I'm continuing my education. And as an ingredient from a NOSB standpoint or for the organic standard, you have to prove that you're still safe and worthy and in that space. And I think because of that, what we have to understand is not think of organic as a logo the way that these other logos are there, but more as a system that is helping support really our end objective, which is just better health for across the board for everyone.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. It almost says more about the product or the company than it does about the healthfulness of what's in there. It could go on a different panel than the gluten-free.
I happen to believe it says a lot about the health of the ingredient for all those reasons that we're talking about. I also respect that there are people that would like to see more research studies on the nutrient value of organic. One of the challenges is, again, how do we define nutrition? So it's always thrown back to me on that part is somebody will say, well, it doesn't have more vitamin C than a non-organic product. I'm like, you're totally right. But the non-organic product has so much pesticide on it that you need 5 times the amount of vitamin C to make that product equal out. You know, I remember when the Andy scores started to be used in Whole Foods, I was really frustrated. I sent a note and I said, how can you have organic kale and non-organic kale have the same Andy score? Because when you're talking about, what is it, aggregate nutrient density? It was density index, right? And I was like, so absolutely not, right? When you talk about, so in that space, there's an oversimplification to try to give a number to help consumers go for the higher number. And it wouldn't have been such a bad thing to have, I don't mind if it was just a 10-point difference, but you gotta give organic kale a little bit of a, little bit of a higher nod numerically than chemically produced.
Yeah, and the most compelling data I've seen about organics is really when it comes down to the micronutrients, these polyphenols, the various antioxidants that we don't,
You're so smart.
it might not, I said polyphenols.
You did, yeah.
The carbohydrate and the protein and whatnot might be the same, the
Right.
macronutrients, but then you get down into
So
those.
for anyone, and please, I'm not a farmer. I've grown up on farms and around it, but I am not. So with greatest respect, I say this. But I do believe it is fair to say that if you, no matter what you do, farming kale in Maryland versus kale in Salinas Valley, your nutrients are going to be different. And those could both be organic, right? So I think it's honestly one of the silliest things, and this is why I tell even, I worked with Earthbound Farm for years and some of these others, is don't talk about one ingredient as having more of something, because I can find you a kale that has less of something than a broccoli or a red pepper, or something else on that part. And so I think we also have to just remember, and I know it's why Michael Pollan has gotten so involved in saying that nutrientizing is such a negative. It really is, because we're chasing something. So what I definitively know of as somebody who studies and works with the body's human physiology is more is often totally the problem. So when somebody's taking more, I have a young patient who called me, I think I was sharing this story with you, but she was calling me, a family friend of mine who has stage 0 breast cancer, but we lost her mom 2 years ago to just a horrible bout of uterine cancer. And she's in tears, and she's not even yet 40, has 2 young kids, and we're talking about all of this. And she was telling me the supplements, and she was like, I'm taking 5,000 vitamin C, and I'm taking this, and I'm taking this. And I was like, well, we get she's like, I read this here, and I read this here. And so I was like, all right, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Let's first of all talk about making sure your digestive system is as healthy as possible. Let's talk about, and I was like, and then we got into the discussion, the one that really matters, especially because her husband's Italian, and they're a very heavily Italian family. And she is all of this big, exercises, eats well, primarily vegan, eats a little bit of wild fish. And she's just like, I love to have a glass of wine, but she was having 2 glasses of wine most evenings. And I just came back and I said, I think with what you're going through right now, I think we'd be in a better place for you to have 1 glass of wine. And she was like, thank you. She's like, I just need a recommendation. How come when I ask my doctors, they know nothing about nutrition. Nobody can tell me how much wine I can have and how much wine I can't have and that whole thing. And I said, so first of all, I actually don't believe that doctors know nothing about nutrition, but the problem is, as a profession today, most doctors are taught that it has to be what the science says. And the science doesn't say anything clearly about exactly how much wine for women and breast cancer, because there are all of these other facts that are in there. And I think that part, and what I did say to her, we were on the phone, and I could literally hear her, this is what her body must have looked like, right? And I'm like, so first of all, as soon as I told her she could have a glass of wine, it was I felt I might have just given her a 400 milligram dose of magnesium and gotten the same reaction, but I didn't need to.
And then you heard the cork.
And she realized, she's like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, here we go, right? And I turned around and I said, so the main thing that I know is a problem for you is how stressed you are about this information. But the idea, so you can't have more wine, wine being okay for you, and the message that wine could even be good for you, you don't get to have more of it. And vitamin C possibly being helpful for you, you definitely don't want to have more of it. And in fact, with vitamin C and many of these others, something that can be an antioxidant can flip over to being a pro-oxidant so quickly. And what happens, we don't have the studies of that because nobody wants to fund that part, right? So I think in that space, we have to be really careful about dosage of things, and also saying to ourselves, really breaking down this idea of why we're always in pursuit of more of something.
That's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about supplements then.
Yeah.
You mentioned, it was a good example with calcium. I need 1,200 milligrams.
Yeah.
Never mind that I already eat 5,000.
Right.
I better take 1,200 milligrams.
Yeah.
How could anyone possibly know how much,
Well,
what and how much?
If you're doing that, you
could
might
stop
also not be pooping, because one of the side effects on that part is, remember, your digestive tract is a muscle, and so without
How many in
appropriate...
here poop?
Yeah, so that's right. So I always, the conversation always ends up going there. But I think there is, so I actually have an assessment on my site, a digestive assessment and tune-up. That's one of the core, pun intended, core things that I advise for people, is to actually know where your digestive system is. So if things are going the wrong way, like so if stuff's coming up when it should be going down, it's a pretty good sign that the body's irritated. Doesn't mean take a pill and stuff things down, but it does say that maybe the lower GI is dealing with more stuff, or the upper GI isn't happy, or that piece. So I think the assessment piece is really important. That is certainly where someone like myself comes in. I think the other part is actually go to your doctor and get information instead of going to Dr. Google and looking up what you might have. We all fall victim to that. I mean, I've literally been looking at my foot before and trying to match it to images on on the online. If I have think, oh, do I have something or do I not have something? Why don't you just, in that instance, where I do think all of us, whatever your doctor or practitioner's knowledge of nutrition is, if they are a good doctor, their role is diagnostics. So they want information, and the more that you don't have to guinea pig yourself and be have all your blood taken or scratched or all of that stuff. But I do think today we have the ability to work from real information. And one of the things that's the best part about that is just accounting for it. So I have everyone do a food journal. Their food journal includes what their supplements are. I get into what you're putting on your body and in your body most often. And that's where I start. And that's actually a really good point as we talk about organic and that piece as well, is you are often putting supplements, if you are taking a supplement, putting it into your body more often than many of the foods that you're focusing on, should I or should I not eat those organic? And that's why the quality of your supplement needs to be at least as good as the better quality of your diet. If you're sort of driving through for junk food in the supplement section, you're just literally, you're putting a pressure on your diet to do something that it can't do, and you're also contributing to the problem on that part.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, to have the same quality standard in your supplements.
At minimum, from a supplement standpoint. Yeah.